Electrification is nothing new to Lexus. For decades we've had its mild hybrid systems proliferating most of the family, and more recently it started introducing full electric vehicles like the UX 300e that's already in Australia. So you might not be that surprised or excited to see that I'm driving another new electric Lexus. This is the all-new Lexus RZ450e. Almost. See, this is a very special pre-production version that Lexus has flown all the way to Melbourne in celebration of Melbourne Cup Week and to prove its commitment to sustainability and electrification. Now make sure you watch to the end of this video because I'm going to show you what makes this car really unique, and it's not its battery electric drivetrain. If you like this video, you know what to do. Hit all the likes and follows and that, but don't do it just yet because you might not like this video. Now, as I said before, the battery electric drivetrain of this car, while notable for many reasons, is not actually the most exciting part about the new RZ. But I'm going to tell you about that a little bit later. First of all, let's go over that battery electric drivetrain. First of all, I have a nice big 74 kilowatt hour battery, enough to go about 450 kilometers, says Lexus. Now that's on the WLTP way of measuring range, so that's respectable. It's also all-wheel drive. Now this car is very different in its mechanicals to the UX 300e we already have in Australia. That car is front-wheel drive, this is all-wheel drive, which means it has two electric motors, 80 kilowatts worth on the back axle and 150 kilowatts worth at the front. But Lexus is very proud of this system because it is completely independently controllable. Those axles have all their own bits and pieces and control units, which means you can do some pretty special things with vehicle stability. Not only do you get the traction of an all-wheel drive system and the clever torque vectoring that you do, being able to send power to individual wheels, you also get really good versatility in keeping the body under control. And that has a great effect for the comfort of occupants. And I'm going to show exactly what that means with a little acceleration test. Now, normally when you go full noise in a car that will do 0 to 100 in about 4 seconds, you get a lot of squat from the go. But let's see what happens in this car. Acceleration is typically electric, rapid, but did you see the body stayed nice and flat? Now that's because those two axles are working to counteract squat on acceleration. And it's exactly the same reason when you brake hard. Once again, instead of diving like a rally car, the RZ stays really nice and flat. Now that makes the driving of this car more rewarding, but it also makes the comfort for all your occupants a lot nicer as well. 230 kilowatts is the combined output of those two electric motors. Doesn't sound like a lot, does it? But 450 odd Newton meters. Lexus hasn't quite confirmed the torque output, but I'm reliably informed it will be somewhere between 400 and 450. The exact figures will be coming and we'll tell you all about it as soon as we have them, along with a few other notable extras. But that's not the point of this day driving it at the Altona test track. It's a first test and a bit of a showcase of the really interesting technologies that this car is pioneering for the big L. And with more technologies like that arriving all the time, I cannot wait to see what comes next. Now, as I said before, this is a pre-production version, but honestly, you'd struggle to pick it. Hand-built pre-productions normally have bits hanging off there, some questionable build quality everywhere else, but this car is incredibly well screwed together. I mean, it is a Lexus after all, so I shouldn't be entirely surprised. There are a few things that you perhaps shouldn't get too excited about, like these carpets, which I adore, by the way, but they apparently won't be making the production version. Everything else, though, is pretty much what you're going to get. One of my favorite features is this photochromatic sunroof. With a press of a button, I can go from opaque to clear, sunny Altona day and back again. And you will be able to buy a clip-in blind if that's still too much, but on a relatively bright day like today, that opacity does a very good job of cutting out the burning Australian sun and keeping the cabin nice and airy and light feeling still. Nice touch. I also have this huge touch screen, which is very familiar to me because I drove the new RX in California a couple months ago. And this car does feel quite familiar to that in a number of ways. It's fit and finish, the interior styling, which I absolutely love, these ergonomic seats. A lot of it is carried over from the RX. One thing that isn't though, this is the first Lexus that is 100% vegan. Now I don't mean it doesn't just not eat meat, it doesn't use any animal products in its construction at all. So this very nice synthetic suede material doesn't come from cows. The leather I'm sitting on, harm-free, suffering-free. Technologically, as you'd expect from a flagship Lexus, this car, the 450e, does very nicely. I've got digital display for my driver's instrument cluster, this huge touchscreen down here I mentioned already with some lovely integrated real tactile dials for the climate control. I've got a brilliant head-up display, absolutely huge. I've got Mark Levinson sound system, that'll be standard to this car. I'm sorry, no arguments please, Mark Levinson, best in the game. And if that's not enough sound for you, you can turn on Lexus's synthetic noise. But I'm not, because I want to hear what this car actually sounds like. I want to hear how quiet it genuinely is. And I'm driving in a very special place as well. I'm not on the public road because, as I said before, it's pre-production. You cannot register this car in Australia without jumping a lot of hurdles. So I'm actually at Toyota's private proving ground in Altona. It's only a little test course, but it's actually got quite a lot here, including this little section where I'm allowed to do 100. Now how about that? There's a bit of wind noise from a very windy day coming across the car, but that is suspiciously quiet. I may have been drugged. But I promised you at the start that I was going to tell you the feature of this car that makes it particularly special. And you've probably already spotted it. It is, of course, this. Now, I've seen the so-called steering yoke in plenty of cars before. Most of them were concepts, and it never saw the light of day in a production version. But this car in production form will get that steering yoke. Now, I was nervous about that initially because, as a general rule, I hate them. They're stupid. They make no sense at all. You can't go hand over hand. If you happen to get caught out with a bit of slidey action, they're dreadful. But this makes sense. And the reason it makes sense is because this car is steer-by-wire. Now, if you don't know what that means, it's basically in the name. There's no mechanical connection between the steering wheel and the front wheels. Yes, you might be as nervous as I was initially, but trust me, there's redundancy built in. But that's probably not going to happen because, let's face it, it's a Lexus and they never go wrong. What it means is you can have completely variable steering feel and ratio and feedback. So at higher speeds like this, back on my freeway section, you turn the steering wheel and it results to a relatively small angle at the front wheels. However, slow down to car park maneuvering speeds and suddenly I get a really big degree of steering at the front. That is supremely cool. The most important thing, and this is why it makes the yoke work, is I don't have to take my hand off the steering wheel at all. That's it. That's full lock, and that's full lock the other way. The system senses the speed of the vehicle and changes the steering ratio accordingly. And that means, for the first time ever, the steering yoke isn't stupid. And that makes me very happy. It's actually a brilliant, brilliant system. Now, not only do you get that wonderful variable steering rate, there's another couple of great features that come with it. First of all, because there's no mechanical link between the front wheels and my hands, the Lexus can filter out bits I don't need to feel. So if I hit a big lump in the road or a pothole, I don't feel it. It's completely comfortable. But it can send as much of the important feedback I want for when I'm driving enthusiastically. So it's this wonderful balance of comfort and also dynamism. The other thing that it does so well is I'm missing an entire top half of a steering wheel. So the visibility of the dashboard is absolutely extraordinary, unrivaled in fact. And it brings this lovely sense of openness to the whole interior layout and my forward view. I wonder how people will find bad habits to drive this car, because they will, and already I've started thinking, yeah, maybe I could just sort of, that's quite comfortable. Or this, in fact, that is very comfortable. People are definitely going to do that, but don't, because that ruins the whole reason for being. Look at this, tight U-turn at 25 kilometers an hour. That is just fantastic. The system works beautifully. I cannot explain how good it is in practice. I was expecting it to be dull. Remember, Infiniti had a go at wireless steering, and it was a bit of a hit and miss. At times it felt great, and other times it felt a little bit weird and disconnected. But you need pioneers of new technologies to get the system introduced, and then you need followers to come along afterwards and then perfect the art. And that seems to me exactly what Lexus has done. It picked up on that initial idea, and it's really refined it and made it work perfectly. There's more good news. This car is coming to Australia around about mid-2023. The RZ will be arriving in Australian showrooms. Pricing, specification, all that rubbish, nowhere near that yet because the car's too far away. But ultimately, this car serves two purposes. It introduces another exciting and compelling SUV/crossover to the Lexus family. But secondly, it demonstrates, quite convincingly, the company's commitment to an electrified future. And with more models like this arriving in Australia, that future is looking very bright. I can't resist every time.